Hello, welcome to my channel WWE Pulse.
Alright, so this is going to be a very quick video. Vince McMahon retired back in July of 2022. And Triple H took over creative shortly thereafter. Since then, WWE's creative has changed quite a bit. It's not just the obvious stuff like the return of the XFL or Bray Wyatt or the debut of the likes of Karrion Kross, though those things are all pretty cool. The overall style of Triple H's creative is one that generally features longer-term storytelling with a greater emphasis on logic. Booking characters that make sense for them to be popular. And of course, an overall renewed focus on the in-ring action. And I think this is something that most people can agree has been a largely positive change. A lot of fans and critics alike have praised Triple H's creative since he took over from Vince McMahon. And if you don't believe me, you can just check out the myriad of opinion pieces and YouTube videos discussing how great this new direction for WWE is. Now, to be fair, there are some who aren't big on it. Dave Meltzer, for example, recently noted that the biggest issue with Triple H's creative is that it's too slow. Now, personally, I think this is just a case of differing opinions. I enjoy slow burn storytelling, but I also understand why some people might want faster paced action. But regardless, even Meltzer isn't outright saying that it's bad creative. He's simply noting that it's slower than what he prefers. But there is one thing about Triple H's creative that I do want to talk about. Because while I do think it's been largely good overall, I do think there's definitely room for improvement in this area. You see, since Vince retired, WWE has made a concerted effort to distance itself from his legacy. In recent years, Vince's creative decisions led to WWE embracing a more PG style of content, which made the product less entertaining for adults and arguably stunted the growth of wrestlers who could have grown into bigger stars if they were allowed to be more extreme and edgy. Not only that, but some of Vince's creative decisions seem to be based on nothing more than personal bias and favoritism, leading to fans growing frustrated over certain wrestlers being pushed, while others were seemingly held back for no apparent reason. To combat this, WWE began distancing themselves from Vince's legacy shortly after he retired, citing examples like the McMahons interfering in matches, which became a staple of WWE programming during the Attitude Era and early 2000s, but hadn't really been seen much of since Vince retired. In fact, Stephanie McMahon interfered in a match just once in the entire year of 2022, doing so to help her husband Triple H win the WWE Championship from Roman Reigns. And some other examples include bringing back fan favorites like the Hardys and the return of the more extreme edge and rated our superstar persona, as opposed to the PG-friendly version of the character we saw in 2016 and 2017. But I gotta say, this whole distancing themselves from Vince's legacy thing, it just hasn't gone far enough. Say, yes, it's true that interference from the McMahons was a major part of WWE programming during the Attitude Era and early 2000s. But to suggest that it ever happened prior to that or after is completely false. Let me ask you this. How do you think Randy Orton became the Viper? Well, if you've forgotten, let me refresh your memory. Randy Orton was feuding with his father Bob, who was then known as the legendary 8-time WWE champion, Cowboy Bob Orton. At the time, Randy was still very green and hadn't really accomplished much in WWE other than winning the tag team titles with his friend and tag partner, David Flair. So in order to get a rub and appear more important, Vince McMahon decided that he would interfere in the feud between Randy and Bob by attacking Bob with a steel chair, turning Randy face in the process. From there, Randy would go on to defeat his father and claim the WWE Championship for the first time. If you're thinking, wait, that doesn't sound like something Vince would do, then you're sorely mistaken. During a 2030 interview with ESP, Bob Orton himself confirmed that the attack from the legendary steel chair was indeed Vince McMahon's idea. In fact, he recalled the moment vividly, stating, "I was getting ready to go in and Randy was facing me, and all of a sudden, Vince came down the aisle with a steel chair. I thought it was a work! He hit me over the head with a steel chair. That's when the heat was real. I bled profusely." Now, that may be one example, but it's far from the only one. In fact, there's another situation where the legendary steel chair played a role in someone becoming a top star. You see, before Batista became the Animal, he was simply a bodyguard for the eccentric billionaire and WWE owner Mr. McMahon.
Excellent.
It wasn't until Batista turned on Mr. McMahon by attacking him with the steel chair that he became a fan favorite and eventually won his first WWE Championship. Batista would go on to become one of the biggest stars in WWE history. And again, it was Vince's idea to turn him face by having him use the steel chair. In fact, Batista himself recalls the moment clearly, stating, "There were always rumblings around the office about how Batista wasn't over enough. Apparently, Vince had this idea to turn me face. So at the end of the night, he called me into his office and said, 'Hey, I got an idea. I want you to come out tonight and run down to ringside and attack Angle with a steel chair.' I said, 'Sounds fun.'" Now, these are just two examples. There's certainly more. For instance, there was the time when Vince cost Shawn Michaels the WWF Championship by hitting him with the Sweet Chin Music, setting up Triple H to win the title instead. Or the time when Vince interfered in a Hell in a Cell match between Triple H and The Undertaker to help Triple H retain the WWE Championship. So, yeah, to say that McMahon's interfering is something that only happened during the Attitude Era and early 2000s is completely false. Not only did it happen before that, but it continued to happen after as well. The point is, WWE has done nothing to distance itself from this part of Vince's legacy. And I think it's something that they should do. Yes, the McMahons being involved in the product is part of WWE lore. They shouldn't try to pretend that it never happened. I mean, it's not like you can rewrite history or anything like that. But at the same time, I don't think it's something that fans are particularly fond of. And hey, if WWE wants to make their new product as appealing to fans as possible, then it's something they should seriously consider cutting back on. And hey, if you guys like this video, then be sure to drop a like. If you didn't like this video, well, you can always drop a thumbs down. Either way, if you want to keep watching, then the next video I'd recommend is the one where I discussed whether or not the current state of WWE is better than AEW. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Okay guys, thank you for watching my videos.